Good afternoon and welcome to the June 28, 2011 joint meeting of the Glendale City Council, the Glendale Redevelopment Agency, and the Glendale Housing Authority. Can we have a roll call for the council, please?
Call, please.
Authority members Friedman,
Here.
Nukian,
Here.
Mincy,
Here.
Najarian,
Here.
Prazian,
Here.
Weaver,
Here.
Chair Quintero.
Here. May we have your report?
The agenda for the June 28, 2011 regular meeting of the Glendale Housing Authority was posted on Thursday, June 23, 2011 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Next.
Next is approval of minutes.
I will move that. We have several dates involved, and on March 22nd, I believe Mr. Quintero was absent.
I believe Mr. Mincy is very well aware of my whereabouts. I will take his word for it.
Be aware that
Abstain from-
Mr. Najarian was absent on the May 24th meeting.
Also. Yet Mr. Mincy was not aware of that. Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, with those abstentions, the minutes are approved as submitted. What's next?
Next is oral communications. There was one card submitted. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Members of the Housing Authority may question or respond to a speaker, but there will be no debate or decision, and the matter may be referred to staff through the Executive Director for investigation and report.
All right, I have one card. Barry Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the authority, staff. I'm Barry Allen. Not too long ago, in the last 4 years, we had excellent training on perception. Perception becomes the rule. And we also heard last Tuesday evening Anna Rundle from the League of Women Voters talking about perception of wrongdoing. And I was taking a look at issues involving 460 forms and votes of the Housing Authority on issues that some of the folks had from advanced development and investment, their contractors and subcontractors, had coincidentally made campaign contributions to people on the Housing Authority on the same day that actions were taken on their behalf. Now, it's just perception, not real, but just perception. And as we've looked at these 460s, staff and I, we find that there are a number of people sitting here today who have accepted money from various vendors to and from ADI. Now, we saw what John Chang, our state controller, did with the $60,000 he received. He's put it aside, and he is going to be returning it to ADI. Now, I would suggest that members of the Housing Authority certainly consider looking at the money that they had taken from people that they may not have known, but now they know where it's from, and that they take that money and return it through the city to the people who they received that money from. And I would also suggest that they take a serious look in the future about voting for issues that people have just paid them on. Now, certainly the public has not seen the 460 forms from that will be filed effective the 1st of August for the period ending June 30th of this year. And I'm certain that we're all looking forward to seeing those. And I certainly encourage you to take a look at your 460 forms and compare those names, like DNA codings and that you see in the newspaper. Now, we certainly can't expect the former Housing Authority member to do that, but the IRS is certain to take care of that situation. Thank you. I'm Barry Allen.
Okay. What's next?
Next on the business agenda at 6A is Director of Community Development regarding professional services agreement change orders related to the 2011-2012 housing program budget in support of affordable housing activities. At A1 is a motion approving change order for Kane Balmer Berkman for legal services in the amount of $125,000. At A2 is a motion approving change order for Tierra West Advisors for financial services in the amount of $50,000. At A3 is a motion approving change order for Kaiser Marston and Associates for financial and economic analysis in the amount of $43,500.
Starberg.
Yes, Phil Anzafame, Chief Assistant.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Housing Authority, this is a follow-up item to the budget that you just approved. In that budget, you appropriated money for certain consultant services. These are change orders to assign that money to those contracts in further of services as we need them. The first is to augment the City Attorney's Office, and the second two are for pre-development consultation with staff. Any questions? Staff working on these contracts are here to answer.
Menuchyan.
These contracts have been ongoing for a while. Don't we have staff that can take care of this, the legal issues, consulting firm, that legal services for Housing Authority? Don't we have staff that can take care of this? Do we have to give out additional contracts for this?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Housing Authority member Menuchyan, we have staff that can provide some of the services, but when it gets into some of the highly technical matters, there are experts in the field that we don't have in what I'll describe as a somewhat smaller law office. But I do have staff that handles and works with a number of these people, provides input and assistance. But many times some of these housing agreements are fairly extensive, a number of provisions that their expertise is something that they're geared toward through years and years of practice, where we just don't have that level of expertise.
After years and years of practice with these same firms, doesn't your staff acquire the expertise to deal with these issues?
It's not so quiet.
Because it's usually, the reason why I ask, it's usually the same staff that deals with it. You don't change attorneys every time there's a new project.
Usually it's the same staff. Sometimes it's two attorneys that, depending on the workload, that will share the work. It's some of that does what I'll call rub off because staff members are working on them, and they do, and as I indicated, they can do a lot of the work, but not all of it. And as Mr. Lansfame noted, this is on an as-needed basis. We don't know how often, Mr. Lansfame can speak to this, but we don't know how often those legal counsel are going to be required to assist. And that's really what it is an assist based upon the additional level of expertise that they bring to the table that we don't have.
And why are they being called change orders as opposed to new contracts?
Mr. Menuchyan, some time ago, the City Council and staff brought to the City Council's attention with the Redevelopment Agency and the Housing Authority that we had contracts that were renewed every year, yet you didn't know what amount was being paid to the firms over the entire length of that contract because they were 1 year. So we had changed our process. So now we bring you back a change order on the contract. We tell you when it was originated and how much has been spent on that contract. We're just starting that process with the Housing Authority. But if you remember, actually I'm not sure that we brought a change order for the Redevelopment Agency, but some of them go back to 2001 when we were starting work on the Americana brand. That way you get a snapshot of the entire amount of work that consultant has done.
Okay, so change order, so they continue?
Yes, it's really a continuation of an existing contract, and we set up the amount in the budget for the upcoming year under that contract.
Don't we sign a new contract every time?
No, no, we don't on these. That's why they're kind of a continuing contract.
It'll be an amendment.
We budget the money, but whether we use all of it or not depends on the level of activity and to what extent the City Attorney's Office needs to utilize.
So they're not on retainers on a monthly basis?
No, we don't pay them unless we actually use them.
Okay. And then why do we have two financial services firms?
Just to spread workload, to make sure that we're diversifying the work.
We're not paying both of them for the same work?
No, we're not.
No, we won't use two of them on the same project.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, and I've said it before, I'll say it again. For both Tierra West and Kaiser Marston, obviously they're very qualified, but I just don't understand why we have to continually rely on these two firms. I think we've got excellent staff members, including Peter Zovac, who knows his business coming and going. And I just don't understand why we continue. I mean, it's been hundreds of thousands of dollars that we've spent on these firms, and I just don't know why we continue to spend the money. I just don't see that it's necessary. Mr. Najarian?
I, for one, am not comfortable at this point extending these contracts. I know that these firms were involved in advising us on some of the projects done by ADI. I'm not sure if the advice that they gave us at the time was completely accurate. I would like some additional time to get into that and see what, see what advice we were given. If there was any monkey business going on with ADI, and I think there's indication that there was, to what extent was it evident, and to what extent were we advised by our financial advisors as to what was going on? So rather than give a no vote, in fact, I would say that would go for all, for Kane Ballmer, for the attorneys, and these other folks here. I'm just not comfortable going with the status quo that we had for the last 2 years. I think that's when these were the most recent renewal of these contracts, 2010, perhaps even maybe before that. I just want to see what's going on. There's a lot of obviously investigation going on, who knew what when, and we as a council and authority in particular put a lot of weight on some of the advice we got, and I'm not sure that that advice that we got was completely accurate, completely forthright. I'm not saying that they knew or should have known what was going on, but I think we need to look into this a little bit more before we extend these pretty healthy contracts with them. So I would not, if it came up, if a motion was made, I would not vote for them today. I would request that we take some extra time in looking into this rather than just acknowledging that they do and perform financial services and give legal advice to the authority.
Well, I agree with that, Mr. Najarian. I will join you that opinion. Are there other comments?
I'd like to make a motion and find out where we go.
Well, let me make a comment first. With respect to a going forward basis, you will have financial issues that are very complex, that are beyond the knowledge of the staff to give you sound advice on, such as, for example, the continuing evolution of the ADI projects that involves very complex financing issues. My suggestion would be, because I think Tierra West was the advisor on all the ADI projects, Kaiser Marston was not involved in those. They've generally been commercial projects with ADI. They do have, however, staff members who are very versed in affordable housing. I'd hate to go without having somebody we could talk to of some complex issue, whether it's ADI or something complex like the Dorn project with the market tax credits. You'll leave us without anybody to turn to if we don't have somebody that we can draw on. So my strong suggestion would be at least allow us to utilize the services of Kaiser Marston, and if you want to go forward and have a conversation with Tierra West about the ADI situation, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to engage in that discussion. Otherwise, you leave us without anybody.
Should I make the motions one at a time?
Yes, can I ask a question? When we have that discussion with Kaiser and Marstad, I think we should, can we do that publicly?
You mean with Tierra West?
Sorry, Tierra West.
I think you have to do it.
Okay, I just want to be sure because I think it should be.
I doubt that it's an item that can be in closed session.
Okay, no, I think it should be public. Absolutely.
I'll move 6A1. See what happens.
Which one is 6A1?
The legal services.
Legal.
Okay, are there any other comments on 6A1?
Second?
I'll second it.
Okay, are there any other comments on 6A1? Okay, roll call, please.
Authority members: Friedman,
Yes.
Menuchyan,
No.
Mincy,
No.
Najarian,
No.
Razian,
No.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
No.
Is it worth going through the other two?
I don't think so. Let's put it off so we can discuss it and at least give them a fair shake rather than have a big no
Okay,
slap.
I want to remind you, you will leave us without that expertise to draw on. And there could be issues raised, whether ADI or any of the current projects we are working on. We will not have those resources to draw on. We'll bring you our best advice, but it won't be theirs.
Well, when can this, if some of the agency is interested in more information rather than voting no, when can they come back and give more information? Can we do that at our
We'd
next
have
week?
to confer with Tierra West as their availability. Again, Kaiser Marston wasn't involved in any of those projects. Kaiser Marston has generally been your commercial projects. I don't think there's ever been issues relative to their services. They do have very qualified, affordable housing staff.
Right, so can I ask my colleagues for an explanation as to why they would vote no on continuing their contract?
I'm not sure who did what, if you want to know the truth. I mean, I don't know. I'm hearing from staff one thing. I just want to stop everything here. I think we really need to go back and look very introspectively on what happened. And we're talking about parallel investigations at this point at different various levels of law enforcement and financial investigation. I think we need to, rather than just, say, okay, we need some help, extend a 2-year contract to these folks. If we're talking about an hourly rate to discuss it with someone, fine, but personally, I'm just not confident in this. I mean, if there's anything, there's a lesson that we learned or should have learned in ADI, and that's just put the brakes on these things and really scrutinize the level of advice we were getting and uncover who was giving us what advice and whose role was what to raise any red flags that may have occurred.
Okay, I don't disagree, but the question is how can we facilitate that process so that we get the answers that we're looking for, but also have legal counsel because we do have these issues coming back to us.
Is something going to come up in the next week?
Well, for example, we're currently working on affordable housing projects, such as the Mercy project. We may need to call on them for advice. If we don't have them, we can't call them. And some of those projects will require talking to a financial advisor about the structure of them. Projects that involve, for example, Mercy is Glendale Memorial, their land, their relationship with Mercy, their relationship with the service provider. And we'll bring you our best advice, but I will tell you the staff will need to call on, I think, somebody to assist in making sure that the information we bring you is sound. Again, Kaiser Marston has very qualified housing people. They were not used during the ADI discussion. And my recommendation would be at least give us that resource. I'll turn to the city attorney on the legal component.
Well, before you do that, let me say, but, with our legal team, with our redevelopment and housing team, all of them long-established employees, with our financial team, basically the budget is almost over. I just can't understand, and the team that we're working with at Mercy and at Glendale Memorial, I just can't understand that we have to continue to bring in outside, quote, experts. If they're not experts, then
They shouldn't be doing
I
the
don't
project.
know. I just don't know. You're next, Mr. Howard. What?
Not so much on the legal, because you've already voted on that, but on the financial side, just to make it clear, the request today, and Mr. Lansdale, again, can correct me if I'm wrong, is to just increase the budget by $45,000. I believe they bill by the hour for their work.
$43,500.
$43,500. It would be $43,500 to increase the budget for the next 2 years, but when we retain them for a project, they bill on an hourly basis. So it would be project by project, hour by hour.
So if you absolutely need them, you can still retain them.
Not without a budget.
Not without the budget.
Not without the budget amount, we can't. If we don't have any money, we can't retain them. Especially with the conversation here, and that is don't use them, then we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that.
Right.
And I want to note, we can't rely on, for example, with Mercy, we can't rely on Glendale Memorial or Mercy Housing's people to give us advice. They're the ones that, frankly, we're negotiating with.
Mr. Garcia.
Volunteer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify with respect to the 3 contracts. They're also was approving a budget for them, but also extending their terms. The contract with Kane Balmer and the contract, which was already voted down, I recognize, the contract with KMA, they actually, as of July 1st, the Housing Authority won't be able to do any work with them unless they're extended, even if it's for a short period of time. And again, Mr. Howard's correct that those contracts would be on an hourly basis, on an as-needed basis. For example, the Mercy project, which is coming before the Housing Authority on the 12th, if either Kane Balmer or KMA is not available to advise us as of July 1st, we won't be able to get that. Any additional work that's not done as of July 1st won't be able to get done. The legal stuff, our office can probably handle it from the point of June 30th going forward, but I'm not sure as with respect to the economic analysis whether or not KMA or Kaiser Marston would be able to would be needed to provide any additional assistance. I will concur in Mr. Starber's comment that Kaiser Marston was not involved in any of the economic analysis for any of the 5 ADI projects. That was work performed by Tierra West.
When I voted that, it was 6A1, right?
Yes.
And I thought that had to do with Kane Balmer and not
Yeah.
You're right.
Kaiser Marston.
You're correct.
But you're saying we can't, we now have nobody to help us. What happened there?
Well, now he's talking about Tierra West and Kaiser Marston, who are financial
Voted down.
consultants.
Legal.
It's legal.
Well, Mr. Chair, I would like to, I've heard from the city attorneys, I've heard from the city manager, but I don't see anything that talks about what Kaiser Marston is doing, just the, cursory discussion that they're a consulting firm that provides the housing authority with financial and economic analysis services for affordable housing development projects. That's a different explanation of what I just heard. We were talking about commercial, and the word commercial came out, and I don't see that in the staff report here. So at the very least, I want to know what they've been involved in, and I need to see that in writing. And if they're not willing to trust our credit that they may get a contract extension, then that tells me a little bit about their faith in the city of Glendale as well. So.
Well, and for the record, they did provide housing advice and financial services years ago on a number of different projects.
Yes. That's right, they did. Years ago, we quit using them for housing a number of years ago and turned to Tierra West. My comment was Kaiser Marston has consistently advised us on commercial projects. They've not generally been involved for a number of years on housing projects. Now, we'd like to begin to use them again for housing projects, and so we've included them in this budget request. Phil's going to probably correct me.
You are correct. I would just note that Kaiser Marston advised us on the Dorn Gardens project,
right.
And they were helpful there because they had worked on other projects where we used that tool. Staff had never used the new market tax credit before. It was something new for us. It is those types of occasions where we look to outside help because they've been in other projects and seen how things have worked throughout the industry, and that's the reason for outside counsel.
Well, I hear what your explanations are. However, I'm not thrilled about the timing of this. This is coming up the week that the contract expires, and that a legitimate request for information that I think I'm making seem to be dismissed, that there's no time. It's going to end July 1st, and if there's any questions, there's not going to be anyone to ask to. So I take issue with the fact that at the very last moment, it's given for us. I'm not trying to, create any sort of issue where none exists, but I think that these are legitimate questions that we should at least be able to get a more full report on. Now, the report discusses this in the past tense or in the present tense, that they provide financial and economic analysis for housing development projects. Is it only Dorn Gardens? Is there anything else? What was Tierra West's involvement in all these projects? I think this is something that we should at least be able to look at and then make a better decision, rather than feel, and I'm starting to feel a little bit pressured into making the decision because on July 1st, we're not going to have anyone to discuss this with. And that puts me in a bad situation.
Ms. Friedman.
Well, that's why I asked how quickly can some of these questions come back to us and be answered, so that hopefully there will be more of an understanding and some confidence, or at least a decision one way or the other. Can we bring that information back next week? And I'm sure that if we can resolve this quickly in one meeting, then it's not going to be so much of a gap that not having that consultant is going to be an issue.
Well, it depends on what you're looking for. With respect to Kaiser Marston, a definition of what role they would play, that's pretty easy. And they weren't involved in any of the ADI. But if you want to talk about their roles, that's fairly easy. For Tierra West to come in and get into a more in-depth discussion about each of the ADI projects and what they advised us, that's going to take more time. I mean, I can't imagine they'd be available next week to do that. They'll probably want to prepare for that, given where you're likely going to want to go.
Would us asking them for more of an explanation endanger any legal investigations that are going on?
Oh, I don't know. Can't answer that.
It's hard to evaluate whether it would endanger any legal investigations. My first reaction would be that it probably wouldn't. My concern is that it may lead you into a path that potentially would reveal closed session discussions, in which case the majority or more of this council is going to have to waive that privilege to engage in that discussion.
That would probably be Tierra West's request, because a lot of their advice to you all was in closed session. Council can waive the confidentiality.
But
Mr. Mnuchin.
all that stuff is over with. The advice was given during negotiations. The negotiations are done. The projects are built. Why would it be closed session?
That's an argument for waiver, but it doesn't.
No,
the
but
closed
how
session-
long the closed session advice, how long does it continue? For years it's closed session?
Forever.
So it can't be disclosed?
Forever, unless the council,
council
waives
waives it.
the confidential privilege.
So the answer-
Even if the project is done and over
That is-
with?
that is correct.
Yes, for example, it's like your attorney-client privilege. It goes on and on. Even though the issue may be resolved, it continues to exist. The council can waive it. And you're stating an argument for waiving it. Projects are done, and we're now in a whole different world relative to ADI.
No, then I'm mistaken. I was under, I suppose at this point, the incorrect assumption that once negotiations are done, everything should become public. The financial analysis, recommendations, votes, and all that becomes public record.
Much of it does become public record through a report, either a reporting out process or a public agendizing process, but the confidential discussions themselves, unless they're put on an agenda or the council waives the privilege, remain confidential until the privilege is waived.
Okay, well, we keep going and going, so what are we going to do here?
Well, here's a suggestion, and that is that you, at least with respect to Kaiser Marston, and I strongly urge you, Kane Balmer, because we do have projects in process that do have time constraints, that you approve those and direct your staff to keep those costs at a minimum until we're able to come back and have the conversation with you. But if you don't allocate the money, we can't enter into a contract on a possible promise that maybe you'll approve at a later date. And that at least gives us some authority to retain the firms where we have to. If you want to hold out on Tierra West, that's fine.
Well, Kane Balmer has already failed. I don't think that's going to pass. So the question is whether we want to do something with Kaiser Marston. Any comments about that? Would be 6A3.
I'll move that and see what happens.
I'll second it.
Okay, any more comments on 6A3?
Or while there's a motion and a second, I mean, I still would prefer a motion where if by next week we can answer Mr. Najarian's questions, I don't see the problem with waiting a week to bring back more information. And that would be, if that would make him more comfortable, that would be my preference.
And just again, I guess to reiterate, the type of information I would be looking at with Kaiser Marston would be the exact, in writing, I want this in writing, to cover my vote, the projects that they were involved in and the nature of their duties and the advice and consulting that they gave to the authority or the development agency or the city in each one of those.
In that case, I'd like to offer a substitute motion, which I believe would take precedent over the original motion. Correct? I'm learning my parliamentary procedure. My substitute motion would be to continue this particular item until next week and bring back the information as requested by Mr. Najarian.
Okay, is there a second for that substitute motion?
I'll second that.
That's for item 6A3?
With regard to Kaiser Marston.
That's Kaiser Marston.
That's as it relates just to 6A3.
All right, any comment on the motion? I hear none. Roll call.
Authority members, Friedman,
Yes.
Nukian,
This is just to bring it back next week.
Yes.
Hold it over.
Okay? Yes.
Incy,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Brazian,
Yes.
Weaver,
No.
Chair Quintero.
Yes, the motion passes. Okay, where are we now? I think we're ready to move on to the rest of the agenda.
Are there any authority member or staff comments?
Just so we're clear, so the record's clear on 6A2, we're going to engage in some discussions with Tierra West about possibly bringing you a report in public session, remembering that this council is more than likely going to be requested to waive the confidential
Can I ask a question
session
about their
privilege.
Mr. Quintero? Sure. Okay. Is it the staff recommendation that they be retained because they have this intimate knowledge about what happened to the ADI situation? Are they helping us with our civil case? And if not, what would be the reason for not just making a clean break with them and finding another company to do similar type of work?
Madam Mayor, members of council, I'll answer the first question. The second question will probably take a little bit more thought. They currently have provided with some assistance related to the litigation matter with ADI and PhD, and we probably will need them in the future just for providing additional background information. We probably will not be using them as a forensic expert for that purpose, but because they were involved in the discussions and negotiations of each project, we will probably be using them in some regard in that matter. And I'm not sure if that's the only reason why they were being requested to include them, or there are other projects, but I know at some point we will need to use their services in the litigation.
So, to be clear then, and it's a similar question to Mr. Najarian's, besides that, using their services for that particular litigation, were we planning on using their services for other affordable housing projects?
We would. However, the authority ultimately has the ability to say we prefer to look somewhere else, take RFPs to do this type of work. There are other firms, Kaiser Marston, there's Cosmon and Associates, and there are some firms. It's not a big industry, but there are some other firms that do this, that could provide that service for us.
Well, I think we should consider using a different firm, just considering the history of what's happened with ADI, but I also understand that if we're using them for the ADI litigation and they do have that particular expertise. Are you waving at me because I've gone beyond
No.
Okay. Then let me just finish this thought. I have a concern about bringing them forward to talk about ADI because there is a larger investigation that's going on by both civilly and criminally, and I think that us beginning to duplicate what's happening, I'm not sure what the legal ramifications of that are. If we're going to sit up here and try to blame a consultant for that situation, I just don't think we're equipped for that. I feel that there are investigating agencies that are doing this very professionally and systematically, and we should allow them to do that and not interfere. But my preference would be that, given the history with this company and ADI, to look at other firms, whether that means issuing an RFP or taking staff recommendations for the firms that staff believes would be the most appropriate to help us with other projects. But I think that we should do that at this point.
Well, let me say what I find interesting is, having served for 10 years now, is that one of the reasons that we went out for RFPs was because Kaiser Marston at the time, the advice that they gave us on some affordable housing projects really bombed. I remember one for sale project off of Glendale Avenue. I think the developers were crushing. I remember that was a total fiasco, so to speak. And so that's why we went out to bid, by the way. Mr. Starburn.
With all due respect, I disagree with that description of Kaiser Marston's work on that project.
Well,
I will say that given the comments here today, I suspect that Tierra West would more than invite an opportunity to come down and talk about the advice that they gave to you on the ADI project. Because frankly, not hiring them on the basis that they had given you advice on ADI, I think they will feel somehow cast a cloud over their reputation. So my guess is they would welcome an opportunity with waiver of confidentiality to come in and talk to you about what their advice to you was on ADI.
I would like Peter Zovak to give him. How is he's been working with these firms, and I'd like to just hear how a staff person, his ability, feels about these.
Okay, that's
that
a
all?
legitimate request. Mr. Zovak?
Mr. Chair, members of the Housing Authority. I'm sorry, Mr. Mincy.
Why don't you identify your...
Peter Zovak, Deputy Director of Housing.
We're talking about these two various firms that we've worked with for some time. Do you feel that you can work without them? How do you feel? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but we keep talking here, and
I would say that if staff did not have confidence in KBB and Tierra West Advisors, we would have asked to go out to bid to identify other consultants to bring forward. We wouldn't bring them forward just for the sake of extending out a contract and having poor service. So if staff has, in its report, has recommended approving these contracts with the 3 consultants, so staff supports the 3 consultants in their work.
thank you.
Well, actually, Mr. Najarian was next, and then Mr. Manoukian.
I mean, it raises a host of other issues. Number one is if they're preparing for litigation, are we paying them for their hours that they prepare in the civil case? And what effect would it have if we stop paying them for litigation, for litigation preparation? Aside from the litigation matter, if there's any other administrative or criminal investigation going on, would a cancellation of their contract alienate them and create an adversarial relationship with staff or the council? I mean, this is a very prickly little area that we're going in. On one side, I don't want to appear that we're paying them hush money by continuing, not hush money. I mean, let's be, it could be characterized by
being recorded
by a litigant that look what you did, you continued to pay them, and the only reason you did so would be that they would continue to give testimony or create an opinion that is supportive of one side or the other. On the other hand, if we were to cut them off rather unceremoniously, as Mr. Starbird said, a mark on their reputation, well, what better way to get even to settle the score than in a court of law? And so just to highlight these issues, I think it's a very prickly situation that we are in. And I hope that everyone, staff and the public and on the authority understand this is not just approving a contract here. There's tricky little issues, landmines that perhaps we, as we sit, aren't even aware of. Are they giving testimony? Have they been given any immunity in any sort of investigation? Those are questions that I don't know the answers to. I just want to raise them and just reflect on some of the difficulties I have as I think about this Tierra West contract.
Okay, all right, Mr. Howard.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
Well, I just want to ask a question from Mr. Zovak, actually.
Yeah, actually, Mr. Manoukian was next.
Mr. Zovak, I know you have a tremendous amount of experience in these housing developments. You and your staff have worked on a number of projects. Don't you feel confident that you can do the analysis yourself as opposed to contracting it out?
I feel confident we can do the analysis to a point. And almost on every project, we've had to, for some reason or another, go and lean on our consultants and ask for additional assistance in analysis.
Even after all these years?
I think after all these years, there's just many more issues that come to light that we deal with. Not every project is the same. Not every investor is the same. Not every leverage funding agency is the same. There are quirks here and there all over the place. The New Markets Tax Credit Project, we'd have 20 attorneys on the phone trying to work out one small issue, and it's very unique, and their help is very valuable to the final product.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Howard?
Mr. Chair, members of the Housing Authority, just as a process issue, this, and Mr. Lance maybe can correct me if I'm wrong, this motion today is to approve a contract to provide financial assistance for the housing projects. The litigation is something separate. We would retain experts as necessary to assist us in the litigation. Tierra West, if they're an integral part of litigation, it won't be part of this contract. It'll be part of the retention where we bring on experts and others to incur the necessary costs to develop whatever testimony there is, to interpret documents as necessary, depending on the role that they need to play. So I believe Mr. Lansman can correct me if I'm wrong. That's separate from what's before you today.
Will somebody refresh my memory? Did we vote on the substitute motion, and where?
Yes,
We're in the middle of
discussion.
6A3 is continued to July 5th.
Okay, we got the votes for that. All right.
I'm assuming 6A2 is just going off calendar at this point.
Okay. Ms. Friedman?
Well, I still think that we should discuss putting an RFP out, and I don't have a problem with Tierra West coming in to talk about their role. However, I don't want it to, I think we need to be very careful about getting into any kind of accusations about any role they may have played with ADI, because that's a matter that's investigations going on both criminally and civilly, and we certainly don't have the ability to try that case here in this room. But it seems to me we only have two options. One option is to continue their contract. There doesn't seem to be support for that. The other option is to go out. Well, there's three options. The second option is to not have any consultant, which staff seems to feel very strongly that that would be a very unwise decision. And the third option would be to put an RFP out or to take a staff recommendation for a substitute consultant, in which case I do think that we would probably owe it to Tierra West to to give them their day in court here in terms of them explaining why they should keep their contract. So those are the three options as I see it, and I think we do have to pick one of those options today.
Does anyone else in the Housing Authority feel we need to do that?
Well, what is the alternative would be to not take any action?
You have the Kaiser Marston matter coming back next week, and their financial advisors. So hypothetically, if the council were to select them as financial advisors, at least you would have a contract for financial advisors. You'll at least have a resource that staff could utilize. On the financial side, on the legal side, we'll work on it in-house, and we have to come back to you to let you know if we run into a problem.
So is this essentially then terminating Tierra West?
Well, it's not continuing them. I think it may be a distinction, small at best, but distinction nonetheless. It would not be at this point continuing their contract. That doesn't mean that you wouldn't enter into another contract with them. When we get to June 30th, I presume there is no more contract, so if there were a contract sometime after that date, it would be a new contract. Meantime, if you all would like them to come back and talk about their advice to ADI, I'd be more than happy to inform them of that and find out what their reaction is and their time frame for it.
Well, just speaking for myself, I don't have any particular desire to do that, but you indicated you thought they would want that opportunity. So I guess we can wait and see if they ask us for that.
Well, I think the question, if Tierra West were to come to the podium, the question I would have, for instance, is there was X amount of money allocated for steel and cement, et cetera. As it turned out, those were not the amounts that that builder appeared to be expending for these projects. That isn't their expertise, for instance. I mean, they're financial people. So I don't know.
They will likely...
Mr. Mnookin?
Are there balances left in these contracts from the prior year, from the current fiscal year? What is the balance in those accounts?
There are balances left. Unfortunately, though, what we were also trying to do was have the contracts expire all at the same time. So if you look at the motions, they all took it out to 2013. In the case of Tierra West Advisors, they have $11,700 remaining in their contract approximately, but their contract end is in September, so they'll have a few more months to go.
Okay, and what about the other ones?
K. Balmer Berkman has approximately $61,000 remaining in their contract, and that expires at the end of this month.
So, okay. Are we needing them currently? Are we engaged? Are we paying them?
Yes, we are.
currently?
K. Balmer and Berkman just finished, and a rough draft of the development agreement for the Mercy Housing Project that's going to you on July 12th, and there's still more work to do on that to finalize it.
Okay, we don't know what the billing will be for that draft?
Don't know what the final billing will be for that yet.
Okay, so there's approximately 61,000, you said?
Correct.
And 11,000 for Tierra West, and what is the balance in Kaiser Marston?
Approximately $16,000.
So all these dollar amounts, what will happen to them?
That was my next question. Are these in projects that will flow into the new fiscal year? Or are they in...
No, because we only contract on an as-needed basis.
Let me finish. Or will they end on June 30?
They will end on the at the end of their contract term. So in the case of the Kane Balmer Berkman, it'll close out.
Well, I want to make sure, though, because these are also appropriations for the new budget.
Right.
I'm turning to our Director of Finance. Will these monies still be there after July 1 because the contracts haven't expired?
The contracts expire, but the dollar amounts are not
money may not be
expended completely.
My thought is, unless they're tied to a specific project, which can be multi-year, if they're part of the general operating budget, if there's no appropriation, even though you have a contract that states an hourly rate, you wouldn't have any money to spend.
I stand corrected. I was told that any remaining balance of the current contract will roll over into the new contract and that new term.
The new term. So in effect, at the end of the fiscal year, because they're not tied to a specific project, there's no rollover of money.
So if there's no contract, then we have balances left over in these accounts.
If there's no new contract, then whatever is remaining is
It's
returned.
in these accounts. And,
Correct.
Yeah, it all goes back.
and what happens to all of that?
It'll put back into their respective unallocated fund balances.
Okay.
And so this would be a reappropriation as part of the new budget.
Okay. I would like to know what the last invoice for Kane Balmer will be, so I know what the balances are at the end of this fiscal year.
Mr. Howard?
Chairman, based upon what I've heard from Mr. Zovak involving Kane Balmer's role in the Mercy Housing Project and the fact that they've just presented a fairly lengthy, and my belief is, from the ones I've seen in the past, somewhat sophisticated and complex draft housing development agreement, I would request that we be permitted to bring this back with Kaiser Marston matter next week for at least assessment of continuing their retention for this project. It's going to be very difficult to cross horses in midstream, difficult for my staff to come up to full speed on this within a very short period of time. As I understand it, staff's bringing this back by July 12th. This project is somewhat on a fast track, as I understand it.
All right, well, that sounds reasonable, and we don't want to do anything to impair that project, so that sounds
We
reasonable.
could bring back another report along with Kaiser Marston next week and a motion that would limit it essentially for this project. And Mr. Zovak may say there are other projects involved.
Exactly. I just wanted to mention the other large project that Kane Balmer and Berkman is working on from a legal perspective is the Doran Gardens project.
Which gardens?
Doran Gardens?
I'm familiar with neither project, so...
The large for sale over on Doran, the very nice project by Heritage Housing.
Mercy Housing, I believe you were here when we approved.
I was here a long time ago.
No, Mercy Housing, though, just recently.
Just recently?
Just in the last few months.
Yeah, Mercy
okay.
Housing was...
Veterans Housing at Glendale Memorial.
Right.
Okay.
That's the Veterans Housing Project.
Okay, we'll take both issues up
Next week? Okay.
Any other comments or...
I would like to know what the dollar amounts will be approximately, exactly if you can, or approximately if you can't, to complete their current work. When you bring that back to the Housing Authority.
All right, what is next, Mr. Clerk?
Next is authority member staff comments.
Are there any authority member staff comments? I hear none.
I move we adjourn. Housing.
We are adjourned. We are adjourned.
Are we doing the joint meeting next?
We did the joint.
There's a joint City Council and Glendale Financing Authority meeting.
That's City Council, though.
Okay,
You've
so,
got the City Financing Authority joint meeting.
yeah, so I'm going to call to order the